I would rather actually talk to you more about how to, when you have these voices and you are driven in a way that you want to produce, but sometimes not who you are, how you compensate against that, right? And so, right, if you talk about, I'm going to talk about from the world of science, but in essence it's applicable to everyone, right? You always, in a professional requirement, you need to produce. You need to produce, right? And you need to be associated with your important discoveries or the work that you do, right? And this is, in essence, all of this results in you feel as you need to know everything, right? And so how do you deal with a situation where professionally you feel that you need to know everything and demonstrate to everyone and deal with the fact that sometimes that drives you to be someone who you may not feel that you are, right? And for instance, the pressure to be someone who you're not, and how you are forced to overly compensate for real or perceived weaknesses, right? And this happens, I think, in any career in which you are forced to perform. And so, some of the ways that you can prevent that sort of thing is, one, look at those people who you see as successful, right? And observe how their working methods. Look to see what the positive or constructive traits that they have, right? And how they deal with it. And don't feel free to ask them, how is it that helped you succeed, right? And another thing is don't be afraid to be wrong. So for instance, from science, right? The whole thing is that we're trying to find out something we do not know, right? If that didn't exist, we wouldn't have the job, right? And so we're learning continuously. But then there are also methods at which you can use to your advantage so that you can use, or how I can say, not be afraid of what you don't know and get to where you want to go, right? So learn how to know where to find the answers is one of the most important things. If you don't know it, at least in the science career, and I think law or any other ology that you want to talk about, is should learn to figure out where you can go to get that information. Okay? And one of the methods that I'm going to talk about and focus on today is the scientific method. And even though it's the scientific method, in essence, it's applicable to anything that you're really doing as a professional career. So before I start talking about the scientific method, in essence, what is science? And in this regard, everyone always sort of puts science in a sort of learned category that is something else, right? But it really is a human endeavor, right? We really want to understand, it's the desire to understand and be able to explain what we don't know, right? Right? And you get into trouble if you don't really want to cover this up. So many times, for instance, in scientific publications, or scientists will like to say, it was found, even though we did it. It was found, right? So kind of to detach that human association with that. And we really don't do that, right? Keep it active. We found this. We determined this, right? And this is actually very important, right? Especially, for instance, if you're actually doing a thesis project, right? Many times you're being reviewed and say, well, what did you do to get that thesis? And if you always say, well, it was done, it's hard to say, well, who did it? Someone else or you, right? Okay, so the other thing that I want to talk about is you do want to limit belief-based judgment, right? And so you want to be, one, open-minded, and two, you want to be true to the understanding of, true understanding of anything is based on confirmational evidence, right? In science, there really aren't any facts, there are evidence, and how you apply that evidence, right? And how we do that will be based on how we do certain tests. So, what is the scientific method that I talked to you about? Well, it's actually an organized method to propose and test explanations. Okay? It's universal to all sciences, so it doesn't have to be biological sciences, it doesn't have to be physics, it doesn't have to be geology, it can be mathematics, right? Law, as we heard about, anything that is involved in basically trying to understand or apply some sort of knowledge base or communication. So we use it really every day. We just, many times, just sort of overlook this, right? It's basically the reason why for things. You're doing something. And it basically is one of the ways that you can be successful. So what is the method? Well, it basically starts with a question, right? A question that you're interested in about, right? And what we do is we turn that into what we call a hypothesis, right? And you do that by just simply changing the question into a testable statement, right? Something that can give you a yes or a no, right? And the test that we do is basically a statement about how to determine whether the hypothesis is true or false. Okay? So, and from that, the test, you do several experiments to fulfill that test, right? You do tests to see how its importance, tests that will either give you a number, a yes, or a no. Okay? And right, the evaluation is based on the experimental results, and then you just sort of reevaluate your hypothesis. So, what are the sort of answers you're looking for? Right? The best answer is a number, because you can always relate a number to another number, right? You can, different groups, right? A good answer is also a yes. Everybody, of course, wants a yes, but sometimes you're going to get a no, right? And no's, of course, are very difficult because we don't know if it's due to something that we did, it's a problem with the method we're using, or it's the real answer. Okay? So, where you can get in trouble when you're doing all of this is when you try to cover up the human aspect of it, as I mentioned before. You sort of say, it was done, it's not me, it's somebody else. Then the other problem that people have is that they stick to a hypothesis because they really want this to work, but they can't get the confirmational evidence that's necessary, and even sometimes look at the evidence that's against it. But they sort of ignore that and keep going, right? And then another thing is that to take a statement, and this is very important, right? If you take a statement that can't be tested, and this is, for instance, when many people talk about science versus religion, right? Science versus belief. So science is something completely indifferent because, right, something that someone believes can't be tested. And if it can't be tested, it's not science, right? So this is where this, the sort of dichotomy is that, right, it's just simply not testable. So there really is no controversy between someone who wants to think about science and someone who thinks of some sort of belief, right? You have, in many cases, many really renowned physicists, right, who are very, very religious, and they have no problem with that, simply because you just can't test it. Right? So, I'm now going to try to apply this in sort of what we do, right, as part of the regeneration, so that you can see how we use the scientific method and how you can apply it to you. So one is, again, you choose an interest that you want to have. And my interest was to understand how to make new tissue, right? When, for instance, someone loses a limb, or, for instance, the heart, right? A big problem also with us is that we cannot repair the damage that we have in our heart, right? For heart attacks or infarcts, right? Where other organisms actually can, which I'll talk to you about, right? So, for instance, one important thing is when you take that interest, you want to be able to take a model, right? In biology, we take a biological model to say that would best fill to give you the answer that you need. And we choose, for instance, a zebrafish, which is a very small fish that came from the Ganges in India. And we choose this animal for many different reasons, one of which, and the most important, is it has the ability to regenerate its tissue. So you can see, for instance, this is a fin of a fish. If it gets amputated surgically, within a week or two, it will come back. Same thing with the heart. So unlike us, if it gets damaged, the heart gets damaged, it will make a scar just like us, but then it will remove that scar and make new heart tissue. Okay? And another thing that people don't think about, right, is everyone's interested in trying to understand how to make new tissue, right? But then this big problem is how do you make it stop, right? And when you hear things about stem cell therapy, for instance, right, one of the big problems is how do you control that growth so that it doesn't become overgrown, right? Nobody wants to have, if they regenerate an arm, have it drag along on the floor, right? Or for a heart to have, extra tissue that just won't fit. And this is a big problem with stem cell therapy in that how can you control it so you don't, in the end, give somebody cancer, right? So, and cancer is, in essence, an uncontrolled growth, right? You have a tumor which controls and grows and grows and grows and grows in a way that the body cannot control. And so, the scientific method, if we go back to that, the question is in many cases, everybody wants to know what's the gene involved, right? So I just simply call this gene X. So how does gene X control regeneration? And so we use the fish to try to find those genes that are involved. Right? So then we turn again the question into a hypothesis and say, gene X controls regeneration. And we're now going to test that to say, is it true or is it false? Okay? And one of the ways that we do this is, right, we first have to, one thing, it has to be there. Right? If it's not there during the regeneration process, right, it seems very, very understandable, but many people just don't think about it, at least many of the students I've seen in the past. Right? And so we want to find out, do the experiment. Is it there or isn't it? Right? And we can look at where it's actually being turned on, and we can see where it's being active. And this is sort of movies, right? For instance, this is in the heart of the zebrafish. We'll have, if we can get the movie working. You can actually see, okay, we'll go down to the nerve. So this, in essence, is a gene within a nerve, and you can see, for instance, the nerve cell body and the long axon going along to the end. So we can actually see in the animal, and we can look at nerves, right? And neural regeneration is also. People get lesions in the spinal cord, right? We don't regenerate that, but just like the heart with the fish, it will make the connections and regenerate it. And then the heart up above is a zebrafish heart, and we can actually see the heart pumping, right? And look at the genes that are involved in the functional heart, right, in the animal. Okay? So we determine, for instance, we say yes, as the information I just go through, right? It could have been no. At this point, you have to revise your hypothesis, which basically don't focus on gene X, but now gene Y. Right? Then the next thing is how, if it's there, is it important? Right? So then the question is how do you determine that? Well, the test would then be change its activity. Right? And we do basic tests where you can inhibit it, which would say it's necessary, or you can increase its activity and say, is it sufficient to mimic the process? Right? And again, for those sorts of things, we're looking for a number, because we can use the number at best, yes or no. Right? And in this instance, you can see that if we manipulate, for instance, the gene, we can basically remove regeneration, so that the animal doesn't regenerate anymore, so that says it's required, right? Or we can overexpress it, and you see we get an extra long fin. That says it's sufficient. Okay? So that, in essence, is how we're using, right, the scientific method and how you can apply it. But as I said before, the scientific method can be used from many different fields and in many different science backgrounds. So with that, I think, yeah, so that's how we're trying to use this fish in order to understand this. So with that, also what's very important, right, when you're going along, right, you want to thank the people who have helped you, right? And in this case, right, I can't do the research alone, right? I have a core of people that do it here at Shanghai Tech or before when I was in Dresden, right? So you can see that Zhou Jing, Chao in Shan, and you can also see Yu Han, who's helped with some of the cloning, right? In the experiments that I've showed you today, as well as some people who were in Dresden, Satu, who was sort of hiding behind Judith, was involved in also identifying this discovery. Okay, and so with that, I'd like to say thank you.